Okay, hello for like the third time. We're going to try this again. We've discovered that the Wi-Fi signal is not great in the garden area. So unfortunately, we can't do the garden tour, but I will maybe post a video later or show you some pictures so you know where everything is at in the garden and you can be up to date on that. So like I said before, I'm just going to start over. This was going to be our day when we plant our plants in our library garden, but since we can't do that together, we're instead going to go through an example of planting a seedling, and then we're also going to learn about soil, which is one of the most important things in your garden. So soil is not just dirt. It is so important. It has so many nutrients in it, so many components that help plants grow. So healthy soil means you have healthy plants. Before we get into learning about soil, I'm going to show you an example of planting a seedling. So we were going to do this outside, but since we can't be outside anymore, we're just going to try it here. This is one of our planters, and right here I have a marigold plant. So as I do this, feel free to share in the comments if you're watching, what plants do you guys have in your yard and outside? So let me know what plants you have in your yard, or what's your favorite plant? I'd love to hear from you guys. So what we want to do to prepare our soil is loosen it up. So I've already done this with this soil. I don't want to dump it on the table. As you can see, it's very loosened up. So we're going to want to have our hole ready for the plant so we don't have to be holding the plant too long and disturbing it. So what you're going to do is turn the container upside down and kind of hold the top of it so that the plant is resting in your hand. And then you just want to squeeze the container like this, and hopefully the plant just pops right out and you can see the roots that have been growing in there all that time. And then you're just going to turn it over into the hole and get that nice loose soil that's free of weeds and all broken up, and you just fill it in. And obviously you can't see this because we had to move, but you're filling it in around the plant like this, and then you can just press it down a little bit around the plant. Certain plants have different instructions, so some need like a little mound of soil, some need the stems buried in the soil a little bit, like tomatoes need that. But that is simply how you plant a seedling, and then you're just going to water it. I'm afraid it's going to come out the bottom, so I'm not actually going to water it, but you would just water it to just pack it in there and give it a good drink to get growing in the garden. So I did that with all of our plants outside. We have tomatoes, broccoli, peppers, basil, all kinds of plants, and I'll show you those later. But when I was doing that, I was thinking about something called companion planting. Do you guys know what that is? That's when you plant certain plants together because they help each other grow. So I considered that, and I planted, for example, the broccoli and the carrots together, or the basil and the peppers together, because those plants help each other grow. So I will show you our garden later, but now we're going to learn about soil. And I see some more people joining. Feel free to comment with your favorite plant or what plants you guys have in your yard right now or in your gardens. I would love to know and share with each other what we're growing. And while you do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about soil. So there are so many things living in our soil. I'm going to show you a few pages about soil. It makes up the top layer of Earth. It is made of minerals, air, and water. Soil contains tiny living creatures. Plant and animal remains break down and they become part of the soil. So all of that breaks down and provides nutrients like vitamins that you take to stay healthy, and that helps plants to grow. So it's like a whole cycle. There's also this other really cool thing, and you might have heard of this before. It's called compost. Do you have a compost pile at home? So some people use compost in their gardens, and this makes the soil really healthy. It's made from food waste, so like the food scraps in your kitchen. Compost gives soil nutrients, and that helps the plants to grow. Many tiny living creatures are in soil, and they're called microbes. They're very small. Some are so small you can't even see them, but they have important jobs. Remember how we talked about bugs and how important they are? They break down dead plants and animals, and this gives soil lots of nutrients. So there's an example of a compost pile. So when that living matter rots and returns to the earth in a compost pile, it improves the structure of the soil, it balances the pH, which we're going to talk about, and then it keeps both the plants and the underground helpers, like the bugs, supplied with food. So humus is the rich black product of composting. Did you guys know if everyone composted, our soil would be so much healthier, and landfills, the places where our trash goes, would not be overflowing? So obviously composting is really cool. So do you guys want to learn a little bit more about it? Do you want to learn how to actually make a compost pile and what goes in a compost pile? Well, this book is perfect for that. This is a really fun book. It's called Compost Stew. Do you guys make stew or do you eat stew? This might look a little different from the stew that you're used to. Let's see what's inside. This goes through the alphabet and it tells us all the things we can put in our compost piles. So get out your garden journals, and you can either do it as I read or you can go back and watch this again later, but write down some of the ingredients that go in your compost stew. This book was written by Mary McKenna Seidels and illustrated by Ashley Wolf. Environmental chefs, here's a recipe for you to fix from scratch to mix a batch of compost stew. Ready to hear the recipe? All right, we're starting with A. Ingredients: apple cores, bananas bruised, coffee grounds with filters used, dirt clods crumbled, eggshells crushed, fruit pulp left behind, all mushed, grass clippings, hair snippings, and an insect or two. Insects are really important for compost piles. Just add it to the pot and let it all rot into compost stew. Look at all of those food scraps. Save jack-o'-lanterns, kitchen scraps, laundry lint from dryer traps, mulch removed from garden beds, nutshells, oatmeal, and paper shreds. So you can put things in there that you might not think of at first, like paper shreds. Quarry dust, rye bread crust, and seaweed strands, a few. Just add it to the pot and let it all rot into, what is it? Compost stew. Take tea bags plucked from long hot swimmings, underbrush prunings, vegetable trimmings, wiggly worms with compost cravings, Xmas tree needles, yellow pine shavings, and zinnia heads from flower beds whose blooming days are through. We're going to have those at the end of summer. Just add it to the pot and let it all rot into compost stew. All right, we got all the ingredients in there, so what's next? Moisten, toss lightly, cover, let brew. It's gonna brew. And when the cooking is complete, Mother Earth will have a treat. Dark and crumbly, rich and sweet. Now open the pot, and what have you got? What is in there? Compost stew. Look at that in there. That's the humus So remember how we said the humus is like that dark, crumbly stuff that compost turns into after a while. So in the back here, the authors tell us a little bit more about compost, just a few more details that might be important for us to know. Out of pumpkins, low on flies. Get creative, improvise. You can always substitute any veggie, plant, or fruit. But please recycle these instead. They won't break down, so not a shred of metal, plastic, packing foam, or chemicals found in the home. So none of those. What's more, no meat or dairy, please. No bones or gravy, fish or cheese, for these will cause an awful smell, attracting animals as well. We don't want that. Earthy, yes. Meaty, no. Synthetic, stop. Natural, go. So spice it up, but be judicious. Keep it wholesome and nutritious. Mother Earth will say, delicious. Compost stew. And what's in there? All of those earthworms are breaking up that food, and they're going to turn it into that final product, and then we can put that compost into our gardens, and that really improves the soil. Earthworms, like we said, are so important for composting. They basically run the whole show, and all those other little microbes too. So I have some really fun facts about earthworms, because earthworms are pretty fun and they're pretty cool. So they move. Do you know what an accordion is? That's that instrument that goes out and in. That's how worms move through the soil. They eat debris and compost, and they discard it out as natural fertilizer. And they leave behind, that slime that they leave behind is very nutritious and nutrient rich. And they also create a network of tunnels as they move, and this helps to aerate the soil and allows plants to breathe so their roots can breathe, because all those little tunnels are down in the soil. Here's some really cool facts. A worm can move a rock that's 60 times its own body weight. So that's like you moving a truck. Crazy. There are more than 2,000 species of earthworms, and they range in size from tiny, 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 1/25 of an inch to 22 feet. That's like 4 humans. Crazy. They can breathe through their skin. They can live up to 12 years. And this one's awesome. Earthworms can sing. Did you guys know that? They sing to each other, so they communicate. Scientists have found that they sing in a definite and changing rhythm. There are so many things we don't know about our soils and the creatures, and there's so many things to learn. So there are a few things we can do to get to know more about our soil, like the soil that's out in our garden or the soil in your yard. So I have a few experiments for you. If you saw in the beginning when we advertised this and told you to get some materials, you can get those materials out, or you can gather them now. We're going to need 2 bowls, a scoop of soil in each bowl, and water in each bowl, and you can mix those up. And then you're going to need baking soda and vinegar. What are we going to do with this stuff? Well, we're going to measure the soil pH. What is the pH of soil? So pH is basically just a measurement of chemicals in the soil, and those 2 chemicals are acidity and alkalinity. So we're measuring if it's acidic or alkaline. So this pH is on a scale from 1 to 14, and 1 means it's very acidic, 14 means it's alkaline. It's very alkaline. So this experiment is going to help us know if our soil is acidic or alkaline, and that's important because plants depend on it either being in the middle somewhere or maybe towards acidic. It depends on with each plant. So we're going to see what our soil's like. So you can get a soil test kit. You can buy one. We were going to do that together, but you can also kind of do this experiment. It's not as exact, but it's kind of fun to see if anything happens. So what you're going to do is you're going to pour some vinegar in one of the bowls and watch it, see if anything happens. And then you're going to pour some baking soda into the other one. Just start with a little bit. And are you noticing anything? I'm noticing some definite bubbles in my baking soda bowl. So what are we doing here? Well, if you do this experiment, if the baking soda bowl bubbles, that means that it's acidic. And if the vinegar bowl bubbles, that means it's alkaline. So I'm not getting many bubbles in my vinegar. If you don't get bubbles in either of them, which mine's not going one way or the other very much, that means maybe that your soil is okay. It's in the middle somewhere, which is usually good. Most vegetable plants like it to be neutral around 7 or 6. So if you have a sensor, you're trying to go in the middle somewhere. But I definitely think that our soil in the library, because I'm getting some bubbles in here, I think that our soil is a little bit acidic. You can't really see very much. Let me try to tilt it down. But I'm getting some bubbles. When you guys do this experiment, what are you getting? Write down in your garden journal what happens. Draw some pictures. Try it with different ways. Maybe you can go around your yard and try different areas of your yard and try different types of soil. So if your soil is too acidic, you can do a couple things. You can add a thing called bone meal, wood ash, or lime. And then if it's too alkaline, you can add shredded leaves, bark, manure, or compost. So like we read in our book, you can use that compost if your soil is too alkaline. So we might be thinking about adding something so our soil isn't too acidic, since we got some bubbles in the baking soda one. Okay, and now I have one more experiment for you to get to know your soil. So what you do is you take a glass jar, fill it 3/4 the way with water, go outside, get a scoop of soil, put it in there, shake it up, and leave it sit there for like a couple of hours, overnight, whatever you want. It'll start to separate, and you can watch the layers of soil. These are 2 that I started. They're different areas. So this was from a garden bed, and this was from just like our one of our like grassy areas. Okay, so let me try to carefully turn these around without mixing them up too much. You can definitely see the layers starting to form. Okay, so what this means is that the different components of the soil are separating, and you can look at the layers. So this is a little chart that shows you the different layers and how they'll settle. So we have water, clay, silt, and sand. So that's kind of how they separate. And you can look at yours. What do you guys think we have here? So we definitely have a lot of water here. We have a little layer of clay right there, I see. Then we have a lot of silt, and I'm pretty sure at the bottom, yeah, I can see some sand at the bottom. So those layers separated. For our garden bed soil, we have mostly, I'm going to say probably mostly silt, because that came from a potting mix. But I do see some sand happening there. So those are, you can go around your yard, try different samples, and see what layers you can find. This paper also shows us that this is kind of where we want to be, with more equal layers. Somewhere in the middle is where you want to be, and you want to have mostly silt, but 30% clay and 30% sand. So definitely try this one out. It's super easy, super fun, and you can draw pictures in your garden journal. You can examine the layers and get to know the soil in your garden and in your backyard. So that's about it for our soil lesson, but I'm going to share some activities that you can do to learn more about soil. So first, you can get out your garden journal and make a list of all the things you can put in your compost so that you don't forget. What's really fun is you can make a poster, maybe for your house. Maybe you could put it in your kitchen, and you can let everyone else know what should we be putting in our compost pile. You can draw pictures, use colorful art supplies. That's a really fun one. You can do the pH experiment, which is what we did over here. We're getting some more bubbles already in our baking soda one. You can do that one. You can make a soil observation jar. You can start a compost bin or pile and maybe track the progress in your garden journal. You can make a worm jar and observe some worms. I'm going to share the link with that for that in the comments after we're done here. You can do soil art. I'm also going to share a link for that in the comments when we're done. That one's really fun. You can use soil and prepare it in a certain way, and then you can draw with it. And then the last one is a favorite among maybe everyone. You can make mud pies. Yes, this is a way to learn about soil, and it's so much fun. So you can examine different types of soil by making mud pies. So go all over your yard or somewhere and gather soil, different types of soil, and if it molds well when you put water in it, that means there's lots of clay. If it crumbles a lot, that means there's lots of sand. So remember how we have clay here and sand at the bottom? But if it's somewhere in between, that means it's a really good mix of both clay and sand, and that silt in there. So observe what is working best for your mud pies. You can even do this in your garden journal. You can use your garden journal for all of these activities, to talk about it, to draw pictures, and to draw your results. So we're going to end our garden session, of course, with a poem, because that's how we've been ending our sessions together, to reflect on what's happening in nature and in our gardens. This poem is called A Hot Day. We have had very hot days, and it's very exciting. Summer is coming. This poem is written by A.S.J. Tessamond. Cotton wool clouds loiter, a lawnmower very far burrs. Then a bee comes to a crimson rose and softly, deftly, and fatly crams a velvet body in. A tree, June lazy, makes a tint of dim green light. Sunlight weaves in the leaves. Honey light laced with leaf light, green interleaved with gold. Sunlight gathers its rays in sheaves, which the wind unweaves and then reweaves. The wind that puffs a smell of grass through the heat-heavy, trembling, summer pool of air. Is that what it looks like outside right now for you? Are there flowers and plants growing in your garden? Let us know in the comments of this video what plants are in your garden, and what's your favorite plant, and what are you really excited to see start growing this summer. So enjoy those hot summer days. Go outside, examine your soil, do some fun soil activities, and that's all for today. So thank you for supporting the library, and we will see you next time. Bye.